Our goal is to become the new standard. We want to become the next PowerPoint.
Gamma is an AI presentation builder business that is on fire. 70 million people have used the product, 100 million in ARR. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Human in the Loop. I am one of your co-hosts, Alex Lieberman, one of the co-founders of 10X, the AI transformation firm. And I am so excited to be joined by one of the co-founders of Gamma, which I think they call it this. I know I call it this, the PowerPoint killer. Gamma is an AI presentation builder business that is on fire. 70 million people have used the product, 100 million in ARR, just raised a massive round. It truly is incredible. And I'm joined by the company's co-founder and CPO, Jon Noronha. Noronha, great to see you. Jon, before we hop in, what can people expect if they watch to the end of this episode? What can they expect to get out of this?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Alex. Thank you all for joining. Awesome to be here. I'm really excited. We're just going to go through a real use case, which is generating a sales deck, starting from the very simple version, but then getting more and more detailed and real, and hoping by the end, you'll have a good sense of how you could actually take Gamma and apply it to do something that would have taken you 10, 20 hours and hopefully get it done in like 30 minutes.
Let's do the damn thing. So Jon, why don't you bring up your screen and get ready to walk us through the workflow. Please, everyone who's watching, share any questions that you have in the chat. So as Jon is going through, if there's anything that doesn't make sense or you have specific questions around use cases for your own work, I'm going to try to feed them into Jon as we go through it. You're probably wondering, why is he wearing this hat? I'll tell you why. I'm in New York City. It's like 30 degrees. I don't want to freeze my you-know-what off, but this isn't about me. It's about you. You have given us your time watching this video, and we wanted to make it as easy as possible for you. So we turned this whole episode into a playbook on our website. Just click on the link in the description, and you can get the whole playbook with prompts, with steps, all the details you need to apply this to your work. Check it out.
Awesome. Well, let's dive in. You guys can all see my screen, I think. So we'll just go do it. So I'm going to be sharing how to make a presentation, and we're going to use a sales example for this, but I would love audience suggestions on where to take it. So just to set the stage, we're going to be a fictional company called Kitecraft. Kitecraft is a learning development company from beautiful San Diego, and we're going to try to build up Kitecraft's sales pitch so they can go get some new business. So I'm going to do this all in Gamma, and if you haven't used it, you can just go to gamma.app and follow along with me. No reason not to. And we're going to show kind of an escalating series of going from very simple to more complex. So you get an idea of what's possible. So the simplest version is we're going to just actually go in here and say, create new with AI. And we are going to generate from a one-line prompt. So start very simple here, just giving you ideas of what's even possible. Cool. We're going to say, let's make a sales deck for Kitecraft, a L&D platform based in San Diego. Now, obviously, this is a fake business. I give it almost no information, but this is just, we're looking to get over to a rough draft because, I mean, let's just step back. Think about the last time you had to make a sales pitch or a presentation like this. For me, the real agony is the first 80% of the work of just like getting the rough draft and the outline and this stuff, not polishing everything. So we're going to try and just speed past all of that. So step one is we're actually generating an outline for a presentation. This one's going to be 10 slides. And so Gamma's going to just think for a minute and try to get us to an outline we can work with. All right, unleash learning potential. We're going to start with some imagery. It knows we're from San Diego because I told it that, and it's going to just give us some high-level context. These are not the final slides. This is just the sort of like bullet outline to say, are we on the right track? So let's just take a look at this and see if it feels right. We have kind of a call to action for a demo at the end. We have some in-betweens that are like visual and text-heavy, and then we have the start. I think this is good enough for now. I might want to rearrange these things or, like redo it. That's all doable. But for now, I'm going to just leave it. And I'm going to make just a couple really simple decisions. So with any presentation, you have to ask yourself, is this for me standing in front of a room with a clicker where I want minimal words? Or is this a very wordy, detailed thing that's going to be a leave behind, something that I can dump with the client? And maybe it's just a reference point on the screen. We're going to start just somewhere in between today, but I would encourage you guys to think about these different options. We'll talk about the visuals later, but we already have our Kitecraft company theme in here. I'll show you guys how to make one of these later on in the discussion. And then we're going to actually use AI to make all the imagery in here. And I think we'll start with an illustrated style that seems pretty safe, but we can obviously go from there on that too. So I think I've got everything I need now to just kick it off and get to a rough draft.
Love
Feel
it.
free to, if you have any questions while it generates, let me know.
as you're generating, we had a comment from Daniel, which I just think it's an interesting comment and also a question for you. So Daniel said, I end up doing more brainstorming with other AI tools because I feel like Gamma jumps to solutioning, meaning outlining, but I need more thought clarification. I guess there's a question here, which is like, to your point, the hard part around building a deck is kind of the going from blank page to what is the story you want to tell. What do you think is the best process for getting to that final story and like really going through the intellectual CrossFit of beating up the original outline, getting to an outline you feel great about? Is there a way to do that in Gamma, or do you suggest pairing it with another tool to go through this process?
I actually suggest pairing it. I think it's not a bad thing that you're using another tool. I would encourage you to use multiple tools. And we're going to come back. So I would say hold that thought for a minute. We're going to show the output first and then come back to what that flow can look like.
Sweet.
So let's generate. I want to just kick this off and see what we can get. Just as a reminder, while this generates of kind of the outline, this was our sales deck for Kitecraft, Unleashed Learning Potential. It's going to just make the first draft of the deck for us. So you can see it's actually spinning it out. So we've got kind of a title slide. We're generating some imagery. We've got kind of this bold intro statement of who we are. You can see now we're starting to get some imagery coming in that follows that illustrated style. Kitecraft's brand is turquoise and orange. So you'll see that kind of like coming through. And we're starting to get some different like slide layouts, whether it's icons, whether it's like maybe some key bullet point arrows, imagery, key numbers. I bring this all up just to show the gist of what this platform is going to do for us, which is take our vague kind of bullet pointy idea and turn it into that first rough draft of slides. Now, this is not the final draft. We're going to come back to how we turn this into a final draft, but it gives you a starting point. And I thought we could actually just look at it in present mode. So you're kind of looking at the document mode where you can just edit it, but we kind of want to see what this will feel like in the room when we're going through it. So I'm going to just go up to present here. You can pop in and out of this.
Cool.
Let's go to present, and we can just actually click through this just exactly like we might do in a tool like Google Slides. So step by step, what are these things? If we want, we can actually, we have a feature called Spotlight, which is where you can basically like focus on one idea at a time. So you can imagine talking through this, keeping the audience's eye on this one thing. We are all about social learning, real-time analysis. I love that even here we have death by PowerPoint, a great call out. Okay, so you get the idea. So This is now a rough draft, 10 slides. But to be honest, I don't think this is actually a very good story yet. To the point of the previous comment, it's a rough outline of what a Kitecraft sales deck look like. But I don't actually feel like this is really getting across what Kitecraft is all about. And we haven't actually honed the story yet. So I actually totally agree. And now that we have this first draft, I think we should actually step back now that we've seen it and say, what do we really want to get across in this story? So my workflow personally is I actually also use other tools to make that outline. We are going to be doing more in Gamma over time to kind of bring this in-house, but I actually am a big fan of Claude as my LLM of choice. And so I'm going to show you a bit of how I actually like to refine these stories, and I encourage you to kind of mix and match with the tools you like. So the first thing I did here is I actually just dumped a bunch of information about Kitecraft into Claude. This is just like a couple paragraphs about the company. This could be anything for you. This could be a PDF you guys already have of like your company vision doc. This could be slides you've already made. This could be whatever. I love just dumping a bunch of stuff in an LLM and then giving it a very simple instruction at the end, which is now turn this into a 10-slide presentation outline. But even that, I would say, is actually still not really enough. I always feel like there's quality with AI, which is the more you put in, the more you get out. And the less you put in, the more you get this like vague slot machine. So I think we should actually give this a bit more guidance on where we want the structure to go. I want to really sell our differentiated vision around team-based learning through cohorted courses and really emphasize the one-to-one touch we bring to our West Coast clients. So by all means, do more. And then once you got your kind of first stab at it, let's just see what we get. So let's run this bad boy through Claude, see what we get. Okay, so you see I've got just a rough presentation outline. It's got some titles and it's got some bullet points. I rarely take the first one here. I would encourage going back and forth with this a few times. So I will often say things like, oh, I like this idea of powerful tools, human-centered design, white glove service, like one-to-one touch that scales. I think we need to expand slide 4 into like 3 slides that go deeper. This is like the kind of iteration that I would do, like really spend some time with it.
Love it. And just as you're doing this, just to give everyone some context again, Jon from Gamma is basically showing how he spins up a a sales deck in a very short period of time. He started by showing in Gamma how this mythological company, Kitecraft, is basically turns a single prompt into an outline, and that outline is turned to slides. But one of the questions that was asked in the chat is, is there a different way you would approach kind of beating up an outline and beating up the story to then feed it back to Gamma, for an outline to be then turned into slides? And so right now he's going through this process of kind of like the intellectual gauntlet of getting an outline to where it's in a great place to give back to Gamma.
Yeah, totally. Well said. So I think we've gotten to a good enough place for the purpose of at least this example now, where I've actually turned this into a 12-slide outline. I've expanded some sections. I've told it more about what we want. Now I want to just take everything that we made in here. So I'm going to just actually copy right up to here. I'm going to go back to Gamma. So when I started here, I went to create and I went to generate mode. I would call this easy, basic, getting started mode. I want to go to pace mode now, which is where I've already got notes to work from, which I would call more like serious mode. Like let's actually now get some real work done. Yep. So we're going to go in here and we're going to just dump in this much bigger content. So I just took that whole thing in. I'm actually going to just get rid of this last part because I just want my slide outline. Okay, cool. And it's actually going to ask me this question, which is what are you actually giving me? Are you giving me the exact words and do you want me to like listen? Sometimes this is the case. Sometimes I will be working in a tool like ChatGPT and I will have honed the exact language I want to use. And so I want to tell the AI, don't mess with it. Like, please keep it. But in this case, that's not what we did. It's actually the opposite. We came up with some rough bullet points, but I want like another dose of creativity in there. And so I'm going to choose this first option and see what we can do.
Awesome.
So this is going to kind of dump us into this advanced prompt editor. Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Also, one question we have from Daniel, who it appears uses Gamma a lot, is Daniel said, when you bring this into Gamma, I found it doesn't always love Markdown. Is there a way to get it to recognize Markdown in paste in text that maybe I just missed? So it sounds like there's maybe sometimes they feel like what's shared in Markdown is improperly converted into slides. Is there a best convention for how to paste context in?
Generally, I would say the best thing which you can prompt for is you can actually encourage it to put little dash dividers in the output it makes. I'm gonna actually just go to this card by card mode here.
Cool.
And we'll have AI actually split this here and you'll see it's actually going to like try to break out the exact structure that we had there. This is if like I know exactly what I want on each slide, sort of like don't mess with it. So it just did that where now I can see exactly what the 12 are. That's one way of getting there, is just making sure the split is right up front. But also maybe that's our bad. We could do a better job. Awesome. So we've got some of those same choices here. I'm not going to dwell into all of them, but we can really tailor like who the audience is, what tone we want to write in. And again, like some of the imagery styles. I'm not going to mess with that too much. Also, don't sleep on this additional instructions field. This is one that I really recommend. To the extent that you know what you want, just tell it. For example, like, make sure you honor my markdown formatting or whatever it is. Like, feel free to put in other prompting if you can't quite get what you want. I would call that the like escape hatch to get what you need. So why don't we now take this much more opinionated outline we gave that was all about transforming learning, isolated learning, and see what we get by running this version through.
Awesome. And one question that was asked, and maybe you're going to talk about this after, is people were asking, like, if we have an existing slide template, can we use that existing slide template, like our existing way of delivering presentations? And also, how good is Gamma at exactly matching what that template is?
Yeah, really good question. So I would say there's two pieces to the word template, and I always find people use that word to mean two different things. One of them is kind of the visual design, so fonts, colors, spacing, all of that stuff. I'm going to talk about that a little bit next, so I would say stay tuned for that one. And we do have some pretty good tools for matching it. The second thing I think you'll mean when they say template is more the layout of things. For example, we always have two columns with like big text on the left and small text on the right. We don't yet have an importer for that kind of template. It is something that we're working on. But I don't want to oversell that piece yet, because I think in some case you're better off just recreating that aspect.
Cool.
Okay, so thank you for helping me stall there. We should now have about 12 slides. Actually, it looks like we're at 11, but we're pretty much there. So I want to just re-review what we actually got. So we now got this one that is actually much more detailed. It actually was problem-led. You might remember that from the outline of it actually started with the problem out there and our vision of team-based learning. So we've kind of gotten out of this. I love that it actually emphasized imagery. Like there's this one solo person trying to learn something. And then you have a team that's like happily doing the same thing. So I think already we've gotten to that next level of specificity that's going to make this presentation a lot more effective. But where I thought we could take this next is, even now, I don't think we're done. And we can just pitch this to the customer. I think we want to keep refining it and making it better. And I wanted to show a few ways that we can do that. Does that sound good? Any other questions on this before we dive into that?
Yeah. One thing I would just say is, as John's doing this, if you actually have feedback as you're looking at this deck, feel free to share it, because it could even be good fodder for John to evolve the deck to the next level. So John, feel free to go through or improve it in the way you want to. But just one piece of feedback that someone in the chat shared is, it feels very text heavy. So I guess even a question would be like, okay, let's just say it's overwhelming with text. What is the best way to actually just like make it more minimalist and not make it overwhelming for the potential audience that you're presenting this to?
Yeah, great question. We're going to show a few ways to do that, but actually the easiest one is to make that choice up front. So this one was in detailed mode, multiple paragraphs on every slide. And that's because the goal here was to create a deck where each slide could stand on its own, even if you're not there to deliver it. That's where you want, I think, the very text heavy. But if you're going to be in the room with that, I would go with minimal. I would actually just completely flip this and say, let's do just like short sentences, mainly use imagery. And I think it'd be good to actually put this side by side. One of my favorite things to do is just run the same prompt 2 or 3 times with different settings. You get such inspiration of what's possible that you just get like a completely different feeling of what's possible. So you'll notice this one has way fewer words on every slide. It's mostly titles. And we could actually slim this down even more. But we're going to try to rely on the imagery more. You'll see there's a lot of the same themes, like the solo person on the screen. There's maybe more iconography, but it's going to like skew very far in the opposite direction.
Yeah. And one thing I just want to add here is like, we're going to continue to go through like, how do you go from Gamma being on easy mode to hard mode based on the complexity of the presentation that you're giving. But I just want to throw you guys some flowers for a second. Like, it is kind of crazy, the state of affairs, where if you look 10 years ago at like a banker building a deck for some M&A work, or like a consultant who was working on a deck for a client, right? We're literally talking about dozens of hours that go into this process. And, you know, is this deck ready to present to a Fortune 50 client? No. But is it getting you a lot of the way there in like 1/100th of the time? Yes. And so I just think, not only is it a testament to Gamma, but also just like the state of AI today, that we're in a place where this is even possible.
I totally agree. And I think we actually all need to rethink how we work to adapt to that. I think we're all guilty of a failure of imagination in terms of what to do with AI. I find this with myself, even just making these presentations, is I'll just make one and I'll look at it and be like, oh, I don't know. But I mean, dude, it's cheap and trivial to make actually 20 presentations and just pick your favorite slide from each one.
Totally.
And so we kind of need to have this abundance mindset that wasn't there before. It's funny, when we started the company, I talked to a family friend of mine who works at McKinsey, and I asked, you guys must have some really cool technology for making presentations, right? What's the technology? How do you guys do it? And he just laughed at me and said, yeah, the technology is called 1,000 People in India. And every night we send our like chicken scratch notes to them. We wake up in the morning to a new presentation. So just that, by the way, is like luxury service compared to what I ever had in my career making slides. But you just think about that person. They actually get one shot every night to send it. They get the result back, iterate on it. And you get another shot at 5 p.m. the next night, send it off. It's a bit linear. AI should change our mindset. We should be making 10 different outlines, 10 different things, 10 different images. Like each one of these things, I mean, it's so simple, right? Like, I don't like how this person is doing this. I actually want them to be looking unmotivated and miserable. And I want to be more of a photo. Let's make a bunch of images that convey that. Like, I can really just push a button and see choices. And I think leaning into choices is one of the most important.
And as you're doing this, this is actually a great question. People talk about how like M dashes are obviously the telltale sign of AI writing. What are a few of the telltale signs you have observed in AI presentations?
Yeah, totally. Well, one of the biggest things is what I showed with the first version of this deck, which is we didn't give it enough context, and therefore I felt it was bland and average. Do I still have it up? I'm trying to remember. No, it was actually the one we made before this. I think it was this one.
Yep.
As a reminder, this prompt, literally the only information we gave it in this prompt was sales deck for Kitecraft, L&D platform based in San Diego. So it did its best to be creative, but I would say there's just a lot of like blah, like intuitive experience. Well, what's intuitive about it? San Diego innovation. Why San Diego innovative? Like, tell me more. You still have to bring that. You don't get to be off the hook from bringing that context. And the more context you put in, the better output you will get, which is what I think we're starting to evolve for over here, even though honestly, I still just made it up.
Yeah. And just to that point, this reminds me so much of like, at 10X, most of the team are engineers and they are AI maximalists in how they're using the technology for building software. And what I've observed about it is 90% of their time is spent planning and then 10% is actually spent executing. And like they are actually one-shotting different features and parts of products, but it's not one-shotting the way people talk about. The reason they do is because they've done so much scaffolding, like building out that outline in such a thorough way that it is impossible for the AI to mess up, that when it actually goes about doing the task, such kind of like bowling alley rails have been put up that you can have a high degree of confidence that it's going to be done in the way you want it to. And this feels very similar, which is just like the more prescriptive you are in the planning phase, the way less you'll have to do editing in the post-execution phase.
I completely agree. It's like measure twice, cut once. You will get much better result. That said, though, I think there's two different ways to use AI and they're both valid. One of them is dump a lot of what you already know in and bowling alley mode. The other one is go really wide, like actually make 10 versions of the same presentation, let it be creative and just pick and choose what you like. I find I get inspired by doing that too. And it helps be able to jump through both modes as well. Cool. I'll make a couple edits to this. There's a couple ways that we can edit. Obviously I can just type in here and say like, no, this isn't right. Completion rates fall to the ground. Like we can just type stuff. I think I showed swapping out imagery. We can of course bring in our own brand imagery. That's a great way to do this. But I'm going to emphasize less the human editing and more walk through some of the AI editing because I think it just kind of gets across the power here a bit more. And so one thing I wanted to show was actually using the agent to make some bigger changes. So there's a question earlier about like, what if it's too wordy or it's too dense? We tried to already make a less wordy one, but arguably it's even still too wordy if you're going to be at the front of the room talking it. So I'm going to pop open our agent here. And agent is basically a way of talking to an AI and making global changes across this deck. So I'm going to just say, this whole deck is still too wordy. I want it more minimal and punchier language. So let's just fire that off and kind of like see what it's going to do. We're going to let this agent loose. So it's going to actually think about this request. And now it's going to actually make a series of edits. Let's just actually see what it said it's doing. It's going to make the whole deck more punchy. So let's just keep an eye on one of these to kind of see what is changing. We have this one about isolated learning. It just shortened even more actually. And we can kind of go back and forth and see the vibe. You can get a sense here. So I would argue it could have gone bolder in there, but you still get some idea of like making global changes. I think we can also sort of like think of as an output.
Nick just asked, is there a way to track edits? Do you have an ability to track edits as you're making edits in these decks?
Yeah, good question. A couple ways. So one is there's this toggle here where you can just look back and forth and see the two of it. I also find that the summary can be here. We also do have a version history if you want to go deep. So if you ever want to go back to like an individual stage of things, you can just go in this version history and roll back to it. We don't still have like a track changes feature, like in the legal sense of like a red line. Maybe we'll add that in the future.
Cool.
Cool. I also wanted to share maybe like an example of like a bigger change we can make, which is like, as we're kind of going through all of this, I think we could just say like, this doesn't get our personality across. I want to get more surfer vibes. This is a vague request. If you gave this to a human, I'm sure they would know what to do. But I love just giving these vague things to it and seeing what it can do. A good example of where I did this was I actually had a presentation that I had gotten 2/3 of the way through, and I realized I didn't know how to end it. I like didn't have a good ending. It's like being, writing a book and getting halfway through, and you're like, shit, where do we go from here? Yeah. So I love saying like, how can I end this? Where can we do it? Just asking for suggestions. This told me I could say things like hang 10 and stoked in the presentation. I'm going to nix that one. I think it's a little too cringe. But I kind of dig this idea of the surf ocean metaphor. So it's like, okay, let's work in some ocean metaphor, but don't overdo it. Okay. Let's just see kind of like what we can do with that. This is just one way of working that I find really interesting is like, let's just try it. And, I really encourage like trying 3 or 4 things and only accepting one of the 4. You don't have to stick with it. That goes back to the same mindset shift.
Yeah. I feel like it's again, very similar to like, if you have a junior person who's building a presentation and they're making changes, like some of the things you think are great ideas that they're changing, other ones you're not accepting. And there's just kind of this this ping pong that's happening with the person that you've delegated the work to.
Totally. Yeah, it's a great way to say it. I'm just looking at this one now. One-to-one touch the scale. So now we are navigating through tides, diving deep with product, reading the tides. I honestly can't decide if I love it or hate it. Maybe we could pull the audience here, but definitely we could either like lean into it and tune it, or just say, never mind, that didn't work for me. Let's try something else. That was too cringe.
Yeah. So this is super interesting, and we've gotten a lot of questions, and feel free to keep dropping questions in the chat. There's a few that have stood out to me. One recurring question I'm seeing is, if we have existing brand or an existing slide template, how do we use that effectively in Gamma? Another one is, someone had asked in earlier on, like, what if you do have like very quantitative, or there's just like a lot of numbers, so I could imagine if someone works again in finance or in consulting, there's probably going to be a lot more like quant heavy slides than what we're looking at now. Does that still work in the context of kind of this flow we've gone through?
Both great questions. Let's start with the brand one and like how to align this with our brand. So I'm going to kind of walk through that aspect next. In Gamma, we call this the theme. The theme is sort of like the visual style and brand. And there's a couple pieces to it. Just to show you what this can do, I'm going to first just go through some pre-made ones. So we're on Kitecraft's light theme. Let's go to their dark theme and see what that does. So you might notice it actually kept the same fonts because those are brand specific, but it actually restyled everything to be dark mode. So it's already got, I would say, a surprisingly different feel compared to what I had before. I would say to me, this feels a bit more serious and professional, a little bit less kind of like goofy West Coast aspirational. But maybe neither of those is what we want. We want to tailor it. And just to give you a sense of like how wildly different the vibe can be, we could do something like this. We could do something like this. We could do something like this. So many different visual styles are possible. I think the most important question that people usually want is, okay, but how do I get it to match my brand?
Yep.
And there's a few ways we can do that. We do have an importer. I'm going to actually try doing it from scratch just because I think it's easier to show since we all have different brands that we're working from. So I'm going to just say new theme over here, and we're going to build a theme. And we're going to just make a couple choices. Similar to what I showed before, this is going to get us to the first 80%, and then we can actually tailor it the other 100% of the way. So first things first, we're going to choose kind of our color palette. And again, we can tailor this. So if you have exact hex codes or whatever you want, we can use those. I'll maybe use this like kind of black and orange one. And if I have an exact hex code of like my brand is not that orange, it's actually like this orange, we can totally do that. You can pull all those pieces in. Similar to like, no, actually like our company is always dark mode, but I need you to always have like this style. That's possible too. So I would definitely encourage working with your designer or whatever to pull in your exact theme hex codes. And the importer can also help you do that. The next one is fonts. So fonts are very important to getting this right. We have a bunch of pre-made font pairings you can use. So maybe it's like more sans serif or serif. I actually kind of like how this one I just clicked on looked. But once again, if you have your company specific fonts, you should totally use those. And so like maybe I know that my company uses like Poppins or whatever, or maybe I use this, whatever this is. You can do that. We also do support uploading fonts, by the way. So it's possible you have your own like very specific like TTF files or whatever it is. You can actually upload those as a custom font as well to use in here so that you're not just trying to get close. You're getting the exact match. I'm going to just use this for now because I think it's easy for us to imagine at least that this is somebody's brand. Look at design elements. I would say, we have a couple just high level ones you can choose from. Do you want kind of like rounded and friendly? Do you want sharp and solid? All of this is customizable as well. I would work with your kind of designer to get this right. But usually there's one that could be like a starting point that is maybe like pretty close to what you need. And I kind of like this outline one.
I feel like we're creating like Spirit Halloween's new branding.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. You know what? Maybe for Kitecraft, Spirit Halloween is not the right place to go. Why don't we actually, I think I liked how Kitecraft had this kind of turquoisey thing going on. But let's go back and I feel like Kitecraft, it is going to be a bit more rounded. It's kind of got this like gentle thing, but I feel like on the fonts, maybe we want to actually change it up a little bit and do something that's a bit more like sans serif. So there's a different way that we can take things.
Yeah.
All depends on kind of what you do. We can drop in a logo. I don't have one handy, but you can drop this in. It'll go on every slide. And then finally,
I think that answers Jessica's question about dropping your logo in hex colors, which is great.
Cool. So yeah, this is Kitecraft serif. We'll drop this in. And we can take this even further. I'll just show, we can do things like put headers and footers on every slide. So let's just go to our page setup here. And we can do things like make sure that in like the bottom left of every slide, we have a page number, or we have some information that is like, yo, this is private and confidential. We also could drop in a logo or an image or even two different logos here to get that exactly right. And those will start to appear at the bottom of each one of these. Once we fill
One question from Nick, and I know we did the build your theme from scratch versus the import, but Nick asks, are you able to upload a PDF of your style guide, or is it better to do manually? Does it not pick it up as well? So like for people who have a brand guide for their company, what would be the best way to best match your brand guide if kind of you're starting from scratch within Gamma?
So we have a feature that is import themed that's specifically for if you already have a PowerPoint file. It doesn't yet support PDFs. It doesn't yet support a whole brand guide. So what I would do is I would maybe use this as a first stab, but then I would tweak it. I would actually just look at the brand guide yourself and adjust it. And I think there's room for us to improve, to just suck that whole thing up and do it for you one of these days.
Cool.
Awesome. There's another big piece of this that I wanted to share. And then we can go back to some of the other questions, which is cool. I have now created a generic presentation template. I think it's better than my first version, probably still some room to improve. I'm actually going to go back. I think I liked this dark one the most of the ones I made. What about using this for a specific customer? I think that's going to be much more important than just having it.
And someone asked about that actually. I think someone had
nice, yeah.
Here from Rob. If you have a proposal deck that needs to be tailored with specific detail for each lead, example, statement of work, pricing, company name, logo, etc., is there a way to input source material, example, a call transcript, to update the dynamic slides with deal specific detail?
Yes, there is. And I would say that there's two ways to do this. One of them is I already showed this agent. You could just go on the agent and actually directly paste in like a document here and say, tailor it based on these notes. But often the workflow that I think people have is they want to get the template right just once, and then they want to have multiple different people use it instead of like kind of in place modifying the same thing over and over again. And so we do have the concept of templates. You can see this here. We can save a copy as a template and turn this into our pitch deck template. And then we also have this idea of remix. So once you have a template, you can say, use this template, but remix it with some new content. So I'm going to hit that one here. And this is basically going to pop us into a new view where we have that same template doc as a starting point. And then you can put some information in here. So I thought we could just do this one together and remix this deck for a specific client. So anybody want to throw out a client of who?
Anyone have a client that John should use for this deck? Well, I'll give it 10 seconds. And then I'm going to just come up with some crazy idea. Okay. From Dylan, we have, now everyone's throwing them in. We have Verizon, NVIDIA, Blackstone, and Kraft Mac and Cheese. Is there one you want to pick?
I'm going to do Kraft Mac and Cheese. That's too fun.
Love it. I had a feeling you were going to pick that one.
I love that. Okay. Tailor this proposal for Kraft Mac and Cheese. Kind of think of what we know about Kraft Mac and Cheese. It's a pretty old school brand. And people there have a lot to learn. Oh, gosh, what do people who work on Kraft Mac and Cheese have?
Well, I feel like a big part of it is it's a physical business. So there's probably a lot of processes related to like physical manufacturing, inventory, demand planning.
Wow, I really can't spell. Manufacturing, demand planning.
And Daniel put in a good thought also is that Black Friday, Cyber Monday is coming up, and they have a lot of new competition from healthier options.
Let's try some urgency. Goodles is going to eat their lunch. I love Goodles. All right, let's go. Let's see what we can do.
Sweet.
So this prompt is going to think for a bit. So we're not going to see an answer right away. It's actually going to do some reasoning about exactly how it's going to actually tailor this content for the specific craft example. So I think this will probably take us around like 20 seconds.
Cool.
But hopefully the place we're going to get to is that it's going to actually keep the sort of bones and the structure of this, but bring a lot of specificity for us about craft and what we told it, which as a reminder was about kind of the like in-person work of like physical manufacturing and then Black Friday and getting that off the ground.
Love it. So as it's reasoning, and I know it's going to finish in a sec, so you can answer this after if you want, but I'm curious, like you talked about how you use Claude for part of the process of building the robust outline that you feed to Gamma. I would just be curious, are there any other tools that you really like to pair with Gamma that you feel like supercharge the workflow of building kind of like a final presentation that you feel really good about?
That's a great question. For me, I would say honestly, most of all, it is just one of my LLMs, which for me, like my workhorse is Claude and Gamma. I usually do most of the imagery inside of Gamma, but I think it depends on the type of business you are. For example, let's say you were Kraft Mac and Cheese and you're trying to sell to somebody new. You have a lot of like very specific product photography and it needs to be on brand. I would use a different tool for the imagery to really ensure that that's all in sync. The other thing that I actually wanted to mention, just as this is running, is we're not trying to run this just in a vacuum. You can just share this Gamma link directly with your friends at Craft. But typically what I see people doing is they are often exporting this into other tools where they continue to work on it. So once this is done, I'll just share some examples of that. But we do have a PowerPoint export and Google Slides exports. People are often pulling this in and integrating with our slides they've made there. We also have PDF export. And we even have like publishing it as like a little website where you could actually send it there too. So some other ones I see are like people might have tools like Notion where they're keeping their like company notes of how to do all these things. Those are all good examples, I would say, of like connected tools you can bring together.
Yeah, it sounds like basically there's, at the end of the day, there's like the knowledge that is informing what is actually being output on Gamma. And so it's like if there are places that this knowledge lives, knowledge or assets or creative assets, if there are places that this lives or you need it to be done in a specific way, that could be like a really good pairing for how you feed in the right knowledge or the right creative to ultimately have Gamma have the right surface area to create a great deck from.
Yeah, well said. The other one I should call out is to take this example of like a sales deck for a craft. You probably have a CRM where you're already keeping track of a lot of information about this prospect or client. You might have meeting notes or transcripts of where you're talking with them. You might have like a series of previous presentations you've done. You might have notes of what they want. And so something I'll tease at the end is we actually have recently launched an API, and we actually have some folks already starting to use that API to integrate directly to their CRM. So they can just push a button in like HubSpot or Salesforce, whatever it is, and like send that context in to generate a deck for each client. And that's really how you unlock this is you really nail down that first template and then you use this remix to just combine it with that context you already had.
Got it. So just be clear, like just even using the example at 10X right now, we have actually 22 proposals that we need to send out for clients in the form of presentations. My co-founder is the bottleneck for that right now because he needs to build all of them from basically from scratch. There's a way where hypothetically we use HubSpot. We could hook up HubSpot to Gamma, feed in anyone who's in the proposal stage, and it would effectively just generate 22 at least starting points for our proposals.
Absolutely, yeah. So everything I just showed you in the UI, let me just remember where I put it here. You can also do through our API. So you start with your template and then you send it the context with our API. And you get essentially something like this out that is specific to that client. Just to reemphasize, the better your input is, the better your output will be. So really get the template right first, really get the context right out of there. But once you do that, making 22 is not any harder than making one. And you don't have to be a developer to do this. We also have integrations with tools like Make and Zapier, where people are starting to like glue these things together. So HubSpot being a great example of like, you could use Zapier to have like pull data out, refine it in this way, and then send it into Gamma. People are already doing some actually really cool stuff with that.
One question from Deuce said, can you take call transcripts with the API to generate the proposals?
Yes, you can. Although what I would recommend is probably an in-between step, which is run your transcript through another LLM that kind of consolidates it into like a good outline, and then pipe it through. I think we could do more to actually automate that for you, but that's going to be how you're going to have the most success right now. So very similar to what I showed in Claude here. I could have just dumped a whole long call transcript and says, now incorporate this in the stuff. You can do that same thing through a tool like Make, where you just automate that as like one of the steps. It'll take a little longer, but like when I say a little longer, I'm talking about adding 30 seconds to an automated workflow that used to take like 4 hours. So it's like really not a big deal. I thought we could just step back and kind of look at the original and the tailored version just to give everybody an idea, because it was a little hard to see of like what changed here. So we had a generic output of like connected teams and isolated learning, but we've now essentially made that specific to this client of Craft. So it's not that different, but you'll just notice every bit is now, I would use the word enriched. It's enriched with that context of who we are at Craft, and that is like making everything go a little better. We've got manufacturing excellence here. We've got kind of more specific departments, production line problem solving. And I actually like this part at the end where it talked about how we're going to actually partner through the different stages. And then I like this part as well about calling in like who we're trusted by. I think we could actually change this to have maybe some specific logos. And then really creating the urgency around Black Friday and Google's coming to steal some
Love it.
share.
One question here is, so as I think about even creating this tailored deck for craft, one of the things I'm thinking about is how do I provide basically the best context possible on like the challenges that craft's navigating, possible places that like AI learning and upskilling can improve their business. When you generated that prompt before, right, there's some sort of reasoning going on. And so I can imagine that, like, I don't know if web search is being done or whatever, but I guess one of my questions is like, am I better off whether it's going into Claude or into GPT-5 Pro and running deep research on like effectively doing a report on Kraft Mac and Cheese's business today and like the key challenges and kind of like any of the high level categories that I want this deck to hit on, and then take that report and bring it into Gamma? Or should I assume that kind of all that is already being done on the back end in Gamma?
A lot of that is being done, but honestly, I would probably still do it in a different tool, because I think you get more of a control. And I think if this is like serious business that you're doing, I would probably want to do it in a place where I can inspect every one of those steps and adjust it for what I want. I think that's the difference between easy mode and hard mode. And not everything is worth going into hard mode for. But I do think a sales pitch to Kraft Mac and Cheese that could lead to $100,000 deal is like worth going into hard mode for. Like you should actually probably spend that extra time on it. And just to show like what that might look like, maybe to go back here where we had this outline, how would you tailor this outline to Kraft Mac and Cheese based on their urgent need to compete with healthier options? Do some research on their business challenge and make it ultra specific. I love doing this. I love just like putting the LLM to work and telling it exactly what I want it to do. And you'll see now it's actually going to go search the web and pull in some things.
Love it.
This might
and
take
as
a
working on
that,
that,
writing.
just a few questions that I'd love to hit on before we finish today. One is David Klein said, can we get an answer to the quantitative deck for finance and consulting audiences? Because I think a lot of even consultants or folks that work in finance, let's say they are allowed to use Gamma, because I know at big companies, there's a lot of just stipulation around the tools they can use, but let's say they can use it. How do they get the fire? Like, can they use Gamma in a way that it, given all of like, usually their decks are more dense, there's more numbers, all these things. Can Gamma work with that? That's the first question that we can address whenever. The second is from Morty, who basically said, I'm not a Gamma user currently, but I'm evaluating it. My current stack is draft copy in Claude, build in Google Slides. Slides is very collaborative and easy to share, but it takes time to design the part I want to automate. Should I be thinking of Gamma as a replacement to Slides? And I think that's a broader question. Should people be thinking of Gamma as a replacement to Slides or PowerPoint? What would be your answer to that?
On the first point of like the workflow of like starting with something like Claude or whatever, definitely yes. Is a replacement for Google Slides? Definitely yes. That's how we see it. This is meant to replace Google Slides in your workflow. You can still export to Google Slides if you want to like kind of interoperate, but we do see it as a replacement. And I think a lot of the things that you probably like about Google Slides, like that real-time collaboration, we also have in Gamma. So I really recommend trying it out. Not to say there are kind of like pros and cons of each ones, but that's certainly our aspiration. And I'm sorry I missed answering the question about the numbers. So I thought we could also just show that as well. We did all this research on Craft, but I asked it to get really, really concrete and put a lot of numbers in.
Awesome.
I would say Gamma's strength is not in generating these numbers. We are not primarily a research tool. So I would encourage you to either use a different AI research tool or old-fashioned, do your own research, put in your own numbers that you want to use. But I think maybe this is the key thing is I would bring all of this information in, and then once we have this outline, I'm going to just do the first 7 slides and not wait for it to be done just to kind of speed this up. But this is where the paste and import mode is really valuable, is you can paste in a prompt that has these specific numbers. And then you can say generate, but I would encourage using the additional instructions and then say, preserve my exact numbers, make it a very quantitative presentation. Don't make up any new numbers that aren't captured here. I could have even on the previous screen said preserve my exact text. Although I didn't do that because this outline I said was not really quite ready to be slides in my opinion. But so you can do that. And also for that consultant thing, I would go to this extensive mode. It's so the opposite. Like if this one is TED Talk, this one is like detailed consultant talk, like leave behind. So I think we should just run this too.
Yeah.
And see what we get.
This one.
One other. To be honest, I would say the deep quantitative ones are not as much of our strength, but I think it's still going to be pretty good. We'll see.
Yeah. And out of curiosity, why is that? Is it because of like the way that you've trained your own models to create decks? Is it just because consultant and finance decks are typically ugly and you don't like ugly decks? Like what is the reason?
I think we have primarily tuned for aesthetics of a live presentation, and these really number heavy consultant decks, no offense, are not really about that. They're much more about, I call it proof of work. What consultants are doing is they're trying to impress you with all the great work they've done by just throwing a lot of words on the slide. And so Gamma can do that. I'm just doing an example of that here so you get an idea where we can pull in all the insight. It totally does work. It just hasn't been as much of our primary product focus.
Yep, that makes sense. One other question I have is there integration with like Excel or Google Sheets as an example? Like I can imagine, especially for like consultants, bankers who are working in Excel all day long, if they could just like connect to Gamma and charts and different visuals can be created based on the analysis they've done. I can imagine that being a powerful workflow. Is that something that exists right now?
Not yet, but coming soon. Stay tuned.
Cool. Awesome. Sweet. And while this is just generating, we have 10 minutes left with Jon. So make sure to share any of your questions. And we'll try to get to as many as we can in the next 10 minutes.
Yeah. And I thought where we'd go from here is mainly just Q&A. I kind of just wanted to mention like this different level of thing, but from here it's like, yeah, let's just see where you guys could take this.
Cool. So Patrick just said the cards are different sizes. How does this work when presenting?
Great question. Yes, that is right. That is one of Gamma's kind of original big differentiators, and it's a bit unusual. It's polarizing. Let me tell you why we do that. First of all, the reason we did that from the very start is what we observed in people using PowerPoint is that actually a huge amount of the time spent is making stuff fit on this like very particular shape. Either you have too much to say and you're cutting things out artificially or breaking it up, or you actually have fewer things and you're kind of filling the space artificially with clip art. And if you just monitor someone, like you just watch somebody making a PowerPoint for 2 hours, it is shocking how much of their time is making things fit. So we actually took this different philosophy, which says, what if instead of you making things fit on the slide, we could just let the slides be different sizes? And there's a few ways that we handle that. When you actually go to present this, one thing that we do is we will just actually scale the content based on how much is on there. So you'll notice the very text-heavy slides just have smaller text than the other ones. Again, I would not generally recommend making a slide this dense for live presenting, but I have been in McKinsey presentations and I know what they look like. And this is a lot of how you kind of show the power of how much thought you put in. So for some people, that's what they want. We do have a max of how far we'll do that. And so we also actually support scrolling slides where you can just walk through this live. So I would say both are options depending on how you want to approach it. And of course, if it seems like too much, you can go back to AI and just say, hold your horses. This is too much. Let's actually scale it back. I think it's also a good moment to talk about export. So we can export all of these things to tools like PowerPoint and Google Slides. I'll just show that here. I don't think my screen share is going to show this. So I'm going to just...
I was ready for you to say you don't have PowerPoint.
No, we do actually. I just don't think I'll see it. At least the PDF I think will open in my browser. So you'll see it. Cool. So let's just look. So this is what you get as a PDF. So for PDF, this will actually just turn into like kind of one clean thing that you can go send somebody as a document. And you can take my word, the PowerPoint's in there too.
Awesome. We have some more questions. So Andy said, AI changes so fast and it's incredible what comes in increments of 6 months or even shorter than 6 months. What's next on your roadmap that you're most excited about that you feel comfortable sharing?
Great question. Well, we actually already talked about two of the pieces. A big one is I think we need to do more on the sort of research and storytelling phase. Where I feel Gamma currently shines is really the formatting and design. It's like you already have this outline and you want to just very quickly get to slides that feel like they look pretty good. That has kind of been our main focus, is like getting you to something like this. Where we haven't played as much is a lot of the stuff you saw me doing in Claude, which is like refining the story, changing the words around, deciding how to emphasize different points, and also doing that outbound research of like what's going on with craft specifically. So we're planning to integrate much more of that research piece into the product so that you kind of do it all in one place and have kind of more of a storytelling assistant. We're also trying to do a lot more with data. I kind of mentioned that's a place where we plan to invest more. We do have charts, but they're relatively basic. We're going to have a lot more like powerful charting in here as well. And just generally more ways of showcasing numbers in a way that feels very lively. One more that I'll just kind of like tease that I think is really exciting, but it's too early right now is we are super intrigued by the power of video. So I didn't mention this as much, but you can also edit images in Gamma and do cool things with them. So let's just say like animate them looking miserable. So you can actually take any of these images and turn them into little videos. It takes about 30 seconds, so we'll just let this run while we're talking. But I kind of love the engagement factor that comes from having like subtle motion in presentations. And I think if I were to just zoom forward of like the kind of thing that's possible a year from now, it's going to be that everybody can have these kind of like subtle, cool animation and motion of like a Steve Jobs style keynote in their presentations.
Yep. Love it. One question from Nisha is, will graphic designers become obsolete for deck design? What's your view on this?
What an interesting question. Will graphic designers become obsolete? No, but I do think their job will change. What we've found at Gamma is right now, graphic designers they actually look like this person, the kind of like overworked, sad person where they're doing a lot of this very repetitive work of just like taking the same thing. Like you mentioned, maybe your co-founder has to make like 22 of the same deck and they're just pounding out these like graphic designs that are all kind of like these very soulless copies. What we're seeing that role evolve into is more of a brand guardian. So they are creating guidelines and actually using AI to enforce those guidelines. For example, Gamma tries to enforce that every slide uses the exact same fonts and colors. And there's kind of this like different kind of creativity that comes along with that. Particularly the companies that are learning to use generative imagery. We see this with our own brand. If you guys have ever seen any of Gamma's marketing, I hope you like it. We have this kind of like crazy surrealist brand of all these different characters. And with that brand, it's all AI generated. We use Midjourney to make that. Our brand designers set the guardrails of what we want it to feel like, and they churn out hundreds of these different things. But they all feel like kind of a cohesive family. And you can imagine a KiteCraft, maybe they want to really lean into this like illustrated figure with a sparkly laptop and use that motif in all of their presentations, but tailor it. So maybe imagine if she had a bowl of mac and cheese in front of her while she's going like this. Like that's kind of the world we're evolving towards.
I think that's a great segue into where I want to end this conversation. And it's actually a callback to what you said earlier, which is, I think a lot of the power of not just Gamma, but AI tooling in general and LLMs is actually human creativity and us pushing ourselves to come up with ideas and workflows that just were never possible before. I'd love for you to share a few ideas either that you have observed from Gamma users that kind of blew your mind, or ideas that you would love to see that you haven't seen as much of yet, where they're like a use case for Gamma that truly is like 10 to 20x leverage from what was ever possible before this technology.
That's a great one to end on. I'll tell you a couple I've heard just in the last couple of weeks. I talked to a company that has a library. They're a finance company and they do essentially like Wall Street stock reports. So they write up these like long, detailed 30-page PDFs that will break down like Tesla stock and their prediction of like what's going to happen and how the stock is performing. They're using our API to turn the 10,000 analyst reports they've made into 10,000 engaging presentations of the same material. And they're going to just run that where every one of these will have at the top of the page just like a little embedded presentation thing where they can go through the same material. And I think that's just going to be so much more effective.
Yeah.
Another example.
I feel like to that point, it's like, obviously the first kind of like killer use case was like speed, just like the speed of building decks in a far less mind numbing way. But then kind of almost like the 1-2 punch is scale, like scale and iteration. Like you can just get so much more output that is, iterated on so much more quickly than what was, possible prior. And so like you gave the example of the finance company, but also even the example we were using with 10X, which is like, before this, we would have never been able to create 22 custom proposals in our brand guidelines before something like this existed.
Love that. Yeah, that's totally right. Just to go another example of maybe like how that can feel. I spoke to someone who's a realtor, and for every home that they're marketing, they have the, like the general like asset, the white paper that is like, here's why this home is great. It's got a great kitchen. It's got parking. It's got, whatever it is. But they actually want to try tailoring it and personalizing a bit more. So, they want to know that, if someone is a like young family of 4 and they're looking for their starter home, what's the version of it that is made for them? Versus this an investment property and someone wants to rent it out and they care about subtly different things. And it was never possible to just create that kind of tailored content in the past. But now with this remix, it's actually almost trivial to make those different versions. And so why not have the 5 versions instead of the 1 version? You've already put in the work to market the house, but now this extra part comes almost for free. So you might as well lean into it.
Love that. Well, to finish up the conversation, if you had to give me your best guess on how many years until PowerPoint is officially dead, you putting it over or under 10 years?
Do you know what year PowerPoint was invented? It was 1987.
That is insane. That's insane.
It was 1987.
They've had a good run.
They've had a good run. I don't think PowerPoint is going anywhere. PowerPoint is used by hundreds of millions of people every month. So I think it'll keep on going for a good long time. But our goal is to become the new standard. We want to become the next PowerPoint. That is how everybody communicates at work. So I appreciate everyone joining the call, trying it out. I appreciate the feedback. You can always reach out to me as well. I would love to hear what people say about how we can do better.
Amazing. Jon, thank you so much for joining. As always, thank you to everyone who joined the live version of the episode. And we will catch you all next week on Human in the Loop. Jon, thank you again.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Okay. Thanks.